right, so hi guys, welcome back. And so we're so glad that you've made it through this hurricane storm. If you need anything, if your family's safe, we're glad to hear that. We really want you to be safe. And if you need anything, please let us know. All right, so we are starting our unit on early humans and the agricultural revolution. And you can tell lesson one by our video right here is going to be about hunter-gatherers. And this is important because technology led to the expansion and survival of earliest civilization. So we're going to look at these things that they've created and the technology that they discover and how that allows them to be successful and to survive. So as we begin, we want to talk a little bit about the Paleolithic Stone Age. So that Paleolithic is a word that means old Stone Age. It comes from the Greek, and we'll talk about that in class a little more. So our old Stone Age, so it's going to end about 4,500 years before we're going to get into writing. People are going to use stone weapons, stones to have tools and weapons down here. And it's going to end about 4,500 years before recorded time. And it's going to begin about 2.5 million years ago and last until 8,000 BC. So that's quite a long time. It's going to be way back on the left side of our timeline, looking at the timeline. And here's some examples of some tools that they would have used during this old Stone Age. Now, to survive the old Stone Age, they're going to have to be very creative. So they're going to be very nomadic. And here we can see some of the dangers that they would have faced from animals and from farming and just surviving. That's not a very good hut there. Matter of fact, they didn't even really build that. That's just kind of a cave that they have there. Neolithic people lived before there were roads and farms and villages, so they're not living together in a city like we would think of. And they're going to move from place to place because they have to hunt and follow their food. So following your food around could be very difficult. You're having to look for food everywhere and follow that. And so it's a constant struggle to find food, but you're going to have a good variety of food. They're going to live in bands of groups of 20 to 30 because that's not too many to take care of and enough people to help each other out. They're going to hunt for animals and food they gather, and what they eat is going to depend on where they live. So if you're living near the ocean or near a river, you're going to have more seafood and more fish in your diet than if you're living in the mountains, because all you're going to be able to eat is what you can find. You have to hunt for it, gather it, and look for it. All right, so here's an example of how they could work together to hunt animals, and that would be useful. And they would use every part of that animal that they could. All right, so there you go. That's surviving the Paleolithic Age. Stay tuned to Mr. Kennedy for more information.
All right, hey guys, it's Mr. Kennedy. So now we're going to talk about how the early humans found some food, because we all get pretty hungry from time to time, and I'm pretty sure food is one of those things that we probably need to survive. So we're going to stay with me and see how they got their food. So here we have some of the different categories. And so the men of this era, the men hunted large animals. They learned how animals behave and their typical day-to-day behaviors. They developed tracking methods, because if you want to find your food, you should probably know where it's going and where it might get their food, to really develop kind of your own hunting methods. And then also the men developed tools and weapons to help them hunt. So these are you're going to get later on in the video notes of the tools and the technology that these early people used. So the women were also very important, and we probably know that they wouldn't survive if they didn't have these strong women who stayed close to the camp and kind of looked after the camp and the shelter that these early humans developed. And they also looked after the children, because we do know that within these early people cultures, within these early camps, they had children to look after. And they usually lived in these large family units. So there'd be typical children running around, just kind of the same things that you guys see in your day-to-day lives. The women would also help search for fruit, nuts, and grains. So they did have a hunter-gatherer society. So you can see some women in one of these pictures kind of finding some wild plants that they could probably use to consume and get those. Now both men and women they had equal relationships that existed. They made decisions that affected the band, and they worked together to find food. So by working together, they're working to survive because that's how they're all going to live in one unit together. Now, as mentioned, they use all kinds of different technology and tools. So technology is just tools and methods to perform tasks. So they used flint, hand axes, spears, bow, and arrows, even things like fish hooks, scraping tools, and needles to help make their lives easier. So you can see all these things that what would make an early human's life easier and the things that they had to do. Using weapons and axes and spears to hunt their animals. And then using things like scraping tools, and flint to help survive. Maybe they need to skin an animal, or a flint is going to be used to help start a fire, which you're going to hear about as well. So you can kind of see some of these images around, and these are all some of the earliest types of inventions that the early humans used to survive. Now, also to survive, they had to have Neolithic people adapted their clothing and shelter. So it's weird to really think that shelter is going to be an invention. But throughout history, these shelters went from being very basic to improving their quality of life. And we all kind of naturally want to improve our quality of life because that's going to make it an easier way to live. So you can see some of the earliest homes they lived in were generally made out of things that they maybe hunted or could find. So you see some that have animal skins kind of draped over, and kind of think about some of the things that they might have had these shelters, why they used animal skins, or why they even shaped them in the cones that you see. Because we do know that shelter is going to help protect you against the environment in which they lived in.
Hi, everybody. It's Miss Tickle, and we're going to continue talking about types of inventions. So, fire provided warmth, light, and scared away wild animals. Early humans produced fire by rubbing two pieces of wood together. They called it flint, and eventually developed drill-like tools and used stones to create sparks. Fire also gave them the ability to now start to cook their food. So if you can imagine it, before they had the fire, they were eating a raw meat, and now they actually have the ability to cook it. Pretty neat, huh? Here's some neat pictures. Shows them rubbing the wood together to create the fire. Okay, so language and art. Language makes it easier to work together and pass on knowledge, as well as express our thoughts and feelings. Some Paleolithic art is still visible, especially in dry, well-protected caves. So you might ask yourself, where did they get the pigments for these? They got them from the blood of animals. They got them from the clay and the dirt that was in the ground. From if you rub some rocks together, you're going to get some white dust that comes off from it. And here's another picture. Looks like a ox or a cow or something. Okay, the ice ages. Long periods of extreme cold that affected all of Earth. The most recent ice age began around 100,000 years ago. That's a really long time. As glaciers grew larger, water levels dropped. So as the water's freezing, you should know this from your science classes, as your water's freezing, it means you're not going to have as much there because it's going to solidify and all come together and make it seem like there's less there. The dry land connecting the continents began to appear. So when that water freezes up and shrinks, all of a sudden they're starting to see land that existed under that water before it was frozen. The cold climate lowered food supply and made survival harder. And people migrate to different regions to find resources. That means when that land bridge appeared from under the freezing water, they were able to then cross over to a different continent that they weren't able to cross before because it was all water. Now that it's frozen and the land has appeared, they can travel to other areas. Oh, I went one too far. Go back. Okay. So here you can see
humans first started out in Africa, and that's where it's showing you. The screen disappeared again. Okay, here it is. Work with me. I'm not into technology. Haha, get it? We just finished technology. Okay. So in Africa, right here where it says number 1, this is where humans were first found. And as you watch all the arrows and the areas that they're branching out into, this is where the human population began to migrate out of. So they migrated out of Africa and began to find other continents because the land bridges allowed them to connect to other continents that they really didn't know existed before. So they got to travel and explore. Okay, folks, that's all for me. See you. Now what do I do, Michelle?
Okay, so you'll hover over the Chrome button.
The Chrome button.
Oh, escape. Yeah. Then Chrome brings that back up. So you hit that one and then stop sharing.